Ryan, how you doing?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on.
What's up, Ryan?
It's good to have you on. So what do you think? As a longtime Celtics follower, I won't quite call you a green teamer, but ish. You nervous?
Not really. I still think it's a bad matchup for Dallas for all the reasons that we've seen through most of the series. I mean, obviously, Game 4 was horrifying, but I really believe in human nature when it comes to basketball series. I just do. And even though, again, from just a basketball standpoint, the way Boston usually can have 5 guys out there that you have to worry about, that they don't have to double Luka like other teams had to. When you're up 3-0, you can say all the right things, watch the motivational videos, come out of the tunnel being like, don't let up, don't let up. There's also this kind of long-term hangover that I don't know that's entirely fair. And I try to point this out to other people. I think you guys will understand it better, is that like 17 and 18, all that stuff was way ahead of schedule. So does it mean like, hey, man, they've let themselves down, they've let the city down so many different times, so now these lingering things are still hanging around at 24? It's like, well, would it have been better off if they had just gotten like an 8 seed and lost in 1-8 matchups with all these young teams instead of losing in conference finals? Like that seems to be a good thing to build off of. But whether it was this year and some of those offensive moments, which were actually pretty rare, the Atlanta week, where you're like, what is wrong with you guys? Why is no one moving? Why are you just standing there in the triple threat, not cutting off the ball? Like, how are you allowing this to happen with all these different offensive options and looking this stagnant? And then when you look at the clutch numbers, you're like, okay, wait, they're actually like off the charts great in the clutch. Like, how come it doesn't feel that way? Now, that's why I think Game 3 is like really telling, because Game 2, we got a sample of that moment. If you're in the building, you're like, are you seriously going to blow this lead here in the last couple of minutes? And they score 2 points over like 8 minutes in the fourth quarter, but then it comes back and that's like a clutch win. And you're like, wait, they're supposed to get credit for that one? But ultimately, this is a different team. It's the best version of the team. And I think those early losses are kind of unfair to pin against them in previous seasons and have that baked into the doubt. Because almost every team has these games where you're like, what's wrong with these guys offensively for long stretches? And I know all of those criticisms and concerns are fair with Boston, but it's just not enough for me to come into this being like, oh, my God, they might be the first team to blow the 3-0 lead.
Ryen Russillo joining us here again on the line. Ryan, you said this is a bad matchup for the Mavs. The Celtics are a bad matchup for the Mavs. Specifically, why?
Because they don't have to double Luka. I mean, other teams can't figure out, or because he's just that good. First of all, he plays an incredible pace. He's got every single angle down. He gets you right on his hip, and you're still helpless. He slows everything down for him. And Boston doesn't cheat off of the other offensive options to make up for the initial action with Luka. So even if Luka's getting Horford in a switch, and they've obviously gone at Tatum to try to wear him down, that there's just a lot of defensive options here to at least slow him down a little bit. And the other thing, too, is that when you look at the combined scoring through the first 3 games of the third, fourth, and fifth leading scorer for Dallas, those guys combined for like less than 29 points per game, and the third, fourth, and fifth offensive option for the Celtics in the first 3 games was scoring 20 more a game. So some of this Luka criticism, we understand it's going to happen because you're the face of the franchise, but the rest of the guys did not show up for the majority of this series. And that has a lot to do with the fact that Boston can handle Luka in a way that it just didn't feel like the teams in the West were capable of doing.
Do you think Doncic has been unfairly maligned?
Yeah, a little. He's the only reason they're in the finals. He's the second best player in the world. If he had won the title, people would have probably said, no, now the belt's his. I would not take it from Jokic and give it to Luka. But I understand that nobody likes watching him complain. But he's been doing this. I actually think he complained more against Oklahoma City and Minnesota than he's even doing in the NBA Finals. But for a lot of people, this is the first time they're really digging into watching him all the time. His defense in Game 2 was atrocious, but he's never been a good defensive player. And you were able to hide him against teams like Minnesota or Oklahoma City, where, again, why it's a bad matchup with Boston here for Dallas is because you can't really ignore many of their offensive options. I think that's why they're so thrilled that Xavier Tillman's getting minutes here without Porzingis, because it's like, hey, it's finally somebody we can kind of ignore a little bit here. But of all the things that I think are fair to criticize Luka of, this team isn't even a playoff team. If he's not, they're not beating Oklahoma City or Minnesota if it's not for this guy. And Kyrie gets to coast off of all of it. Like, Kyrie had incredible games against Minnesota. He had awesome moments against Oklahoma City. He also has had single-digit playoff games, and he wasn't very good in the first 2 games. I thought he was, despite, 16, 18 points in Game 2, I didn't really think he was all that impactful. And, I understand that goes with it. When you're the leader of a team, you're going to be criticized. But I thought it got really weird after they were down 3-0.
But that said, Ryan, if they're to lose Dallas this offseason, shouldn't he, in his best interest, lose 10, 15 pounds and commit
30
better conditioning coming back next season?
I wouldn't want him to lose 30, Mazz. I think one of the beautiful things about his game is that he uses that size against you so much. I think everybody should at least be an average defender. I think it comes down to pride and just situational awareness, and he really got to take a lot of that time off in Minnesota. If you watch that series, like, he could just hang on the baseline and never really have to be used the way he's being targeted and just the positions that he's in against Boston, because they have 5 guys that you have to worry about with the ball in their hands. So, yeah, sure. I mean, if you want to add him on the should lose weight off-season list, I'm not going to say that he shouldn't, but I think it's a defensive awareness and a competitiveness that I think a lot of great young players, it kind of takes them a few years before they go, hey, I need to figure out a way to be passable here defensively. And he was better in Game 4, which isn't saying much, because I thought there were moments in Game 3 and Game 2 that were atrocious.
Does Kyrie worry you at all in this game, Ryan?
Only from the sense that, like, when he gets it going, it's literally impossible, right? When he really gets into his stuff where you can't stay in front of him, and then he pulls up quicker than you're able to react. But the more he keeps talking about his time in Boston, I feel like that's a huge positive for Celtics fans. Because, like, granted, people are asking him the questions, but he's willing to go, like, these are long-form podcasts that he's doing every time he talks about it. And it clearly, it got to him in game, like, I was in the building in Game 2, and he kind of can't help himself. I mean, granted, I don't know what it's like to have 17,000 people cheer that you suck, but maybe I'll get that experience one day. But he kind of pretends he's, like, above it, but I don't really think that he is. And I'm not saying that we all should be above it or that he should be above it, but he's more than willing to, like, continue to explore all these things. And I'm like, looking at it. Every time I see another breakout video on it, I'm like, good. Yeah, keep digging back into 5 years, 6 years ago. Tell us all of your thoughts. Like, keep your focus away from what you need to do.
Can't you believe, isn't it hard to believe that someone there in Dallas hasn't pulled him aside and said, Kyrie, you've answered the questions now. I mean, every time you ask, he answers. And like Ryan said, they're long form.
No, they are. He goes on and on.
So it's like, he could easily say, guys, I've answered the question, several different times now. I just want to focus on the next game. Like, he could easily do that, and he would be legit in doing it.
Totally.
Because he's given us more than we've even asked for. And no one in Dallas has had the sense to say, Kyrie, okay, enough, right, Ryan? Like, who's there to talk to him?
I can't believe it. Like, I'm always, I was like, wait, there's another one? Like, the most recent one. And maybe it's, if you want to take it as a positive, if you're a Celtics fan, it's like, maybe he really does have that kind of remorse. Maybe he really does kind of appreciate things a little bit more as he gets older, which I think is a very natural thing. But, for me, or like a Bill doing it nationally over the years, we just heard from all these people, it's like, oh, you're still hurt because he left the Celtics. I'm like, I don't care, first of all. And number two, like, that 19 team was one of my least favorite teams I've ever watched in my entire life. I couldn't wait for that season to be over. So I didn't really, there's still other chapters of the Kyrie story that have nothing to do with the Celtics, where last year when they gave him the contract, I was like, I would not be in business with him, okay? I would not be in business with him. I think Dallas paid him as much as they did just because they were like, even if there's no market for him at this number with other teams, which is all understandable, like, we actually have to kind of still pay him something comparable to his peers just to let him feel like he's still appreciated here. And I'm thinking to myself, like, if you have to pay, we're worried about where you're at mentally, kind of tax on a contract, shouldn't that tell you the answer of whether or not you should do it? However, he's rejuvenated himself. He's repaired the perception more nationally and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know if this is some kind of guilt, or maybe he just likes talking, man. I think he likes talking on a lot of different topics, and he's in Boston. He keeps getting asked it. But I'm with you. I think at some point Jason Kidd would be like, hey, we got it. Enough. Like, you explained it. We got Game 4 for our lives here.
He likes talking about himself.
Oh, my God.
Is what it is.
It's crazy.
Oh, my gosh. It's exhausting.
All right, Ryan, as a Boston guy, longtime Celtic guy, but now, you really do a national thing on the NBA. What's your perspective on how the Celtics have been covered and the storylines around the Celtics and what Celtics fans would say, the narratives around the Celtics? I feel, and you won't be surprised to hear this, I think Celtics fans are very whiny about the thing, oversensitive about the thing. I look at the criticism that Doncic has gotten the last week and say to Celtics fans, see? they're not just targeting you or Tatum. It's when you're considered one of the best players in the world and you don't win, that's what you get. That comes, and I think, Ryan, most of the stuff that the Celtics have gotten, that Tatum's gotten, the Tatum Brown thing, like all of it, I think it's all just sort of comes with the territory. But what about you? Do you think, there's any narratives that have been unfair and that you don't like hearing as a Celtic fan, or do you think it all is just coming with the territory?
Yeah, it's a really good question because, ultimately I think what I've learned, both doing it locally and then nationally and being a crazy super fan and then kind of just having that part of my life evolve into something where the wins and losses are not the same emotional investment. I think the thing I've learned, and maybe people will disagree with me, is that we really only pay attention to the biases that impact the things we care about. And we somehow completely neglect all the other times that would maybe eliminate all this bias that we think is pointed right at us. I'll give you an example. This is a perfect example. Remember the old NFL season DVD recaps, right? Remember how awesome those were? And,
sure.
The Raiders would be 4-12, but the narrator would be like, and that was a sign that moving forward, Raiders football. And you're like, dude, they're 4-12. They stunk. But you've got to figure out a way to get people to actually buy the DVD after a terrible season. So I would watch those, and they play them on NFL Films, and I was convinced that they hated the Patriots because it always felt like every time an awesome offensive play was happening, it was happening against the Pats defense. And I'd get so mad, and I would turn to my roommate and be like, I can't believe this. I can't believe they used the Pats in a bad play again. And here's the lesson of that, is I only was paying attention when I saw the Pats uniform up there. I wasn't paying attention to all the other times, all the other defenses in the NFL, for all those other fan bases, that they were getting worked in some kind of highlight because I didn't care about those. So I didn't notice those. It didn't register the same way. So whenever I think about criticism for the team or a Tatum or Brown or some of the narratives around the Celtics this year, okay, let's start let's go back to kind of where we started. This has been a weird year. When I watch the two Denver games, I go, I just don't think if they're playing against Denver in the finals, I'm not going to pick Boston. I have to remember these two games where Denver felt like they could go to things that Boston can go to. And granted, they get the best player in the world. It doesn't mean I think the Celtics suck. I was going to pick the Celtics against almost everybody. I was going to pick them against everybody in the East. I know everybody's annoyed that it was an easier path. Even if all those other teams are healthy, I still would have expected Boston to take them out. But as the stakes raise, so does the attention, and that means that these TV shows for 2 weeks only have two teams to pick from. And when Tatum has a bad game, they're going to get on Tatum because he's first team All-NBA. He's in the MVP conversation. And the tough thing for the Tatum conversation is that he's awesome. I love Tatum, okay? But he's not those guys. He's not Luka. He's not Giannis. He's not Jokic. I don't even know if he's SGA. And if we want to get into the Brunson stuff, we could. I've said at times I think I like Booker more because of his aggressiveness. But having Tatum on your team is still an awesome thing. And saying he's not as good as four other people in the world isn't some massive insult. But then it becomes treated that way as if you're being totally unfair. Where if Tatum had shot the ball well, was getting 30 a game, they win this series or 5 or 6. Then we start turning it to the other absurd angle of hey, is Tatum actually in the conversation for best player in the world? You're like, why am I doing that? Just because they won? I've watched all these games for all of these years. I know where he is. And for you to say he's not the number one or number two player in the world isn't actually this huge criticism that I think fans get. You want all of these things and then you want that too. That's not even true. That's where the arguments lose me.
Yeah, and we're in the middle of that.
Yep, exactly. Yep.
All right, Ryan, how's our guy JJ Redick doing? He going to get that Lakers job?
What happened?
I don't know.
You know what? It wasn't our fault, Ryan. It wasn't.
I assumed it was. And then
No, really. Go back and listen to it. If you get a chance, listen to it.
I'm telling you.
No, I'm serious. He didn't want to come on. I'm telling you, he didn't want to come on from the very beginning.
Yeah, because to be fair, when I heard about what had happened, I went, I can't believe those guys messed with him that much. And I was like, Felger must have just started it somewhere where I was like, it was just downhill. And then I listened to it, and I was like, yeah, I guess he just didn't really want to go on with you guys.
Well, again, he's not alone. But thank you, Ryan, for dipping your toe in the water. We appreciate it, all right? We can hear you with Simmons here coming up soon?
Yeah, we'll have a recap of all this. We're both going to the game tonight, so it's great to be back home.
Awesome. Ryan, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
If you like that clip, check out more videos from Felger and Mazz here. For more Celtics analysis and opinion, hit this playlist. And for all the latest from the Sports Hub, download the app at 985thesportshub.com.